Welcome to this short tour of the tax checklist generator. What we can see on the screen is that we're starting off on the SWAT UK homepage, which is www.swat.co.uk. And we're doing this because the tax checklist generator is an online product. So to access it, a user needs to first log in by going to the login button on the top right of the screen. And once logged in on the SWAT site, all products the person subscribes to can be accessed through the My Accounts area. So we can see here that the tax checklist generator is one of the products that I'm able to access. So with a valid subscription in place, a user is able to access this tax checklist generator homepage or the dashboard, as it could be called. If you have any trouble logging in at any point, there is always this phone number appearing on the top of the SWAT screens. Give that a call and any of our team that answer the phones will be able to help with your login details and your password. So once we're in this client area, and to stress this client area is for valid subscribers only, we can access the control panel. And there's a number of features here that we can now get at. At any time, we can go to Help. And within the Help function, there is a Quick Start Guide, which has lots of information on both the product itself and also using some of the basic features of the product, so how to tailor Excel, for example. There is some guidance on that within this Help page. But the most exciting part of the feature, of course, has to be the tax checklist generator itself. So we can see we've got a big Start button, and as logic would suggest, we open that. So we press Start, and we're going to open the generator, which is actually an Excel-based file. So what the tax checklist generator is a set of tailorable Excel checklists. And we'll produce one in a moment to give you an idea of the sort of checklist that you're able to produce and then either complete on screen or, if you prefer, print and complete in a traditional style. So at this stage, we've now opened a template file. We can see at the top that it is saying read only. So in real life, we would perhaps at this stage save it into a client directory. But for now, we'll just carry on and use this file as it's loaded. Of course, this is now a copy on my own personal computer, and so we can't do any damage to the master template by using this. So first tab that we've opened up here straight away is an Instructions tab. So again, there's plenty of guidance in the checklist generator itself on how to use it and how to use some of its particular features. The second tab, Checklist Generator, is where we can start actually producing a checklist for the client that we've got in mind. So if we want to, we don't need to, we can enter the client details on this first tab. So we could give the client name, we could give the year end, we could give it a file number, preparer's initials, and preparation date. And we'll see where that comes through in a moment. Then we select the return type that we are completing for this client. Currently in the tax checklist generator, these are the options available. So we can produce checklists for personal tax returns, for partnership tax returns, for company tax returns, trust returns, VAT returns, or Forms P11D, and Forms P11DB is in there as well. So for now, we'll just produce a personal return. But just to show you, actually, it has defaulted to personal returns. So we have got the personal return tab showing here that we'll look at in just a moment. But if we were changing this, say we wanted to actually do a corporation tax return, you can see the checklist, it's automatically refreshing as we go. So the checklist is in this third tab. But whatever we select, it's starting to tailor that. At part 3 of the generator, it's asking us what sort of questions we want. A number of the questions that are pulled into the various checklists come from the revenues toolkits that are written specifically for agents. So it has to be said that the toolkits are expressing the revenues view, which isn't necessarily the interpretation of the law that an agent might take. But we do add commentary to that effect as and where applicable. But we're showing these areas that the revenue thinks are risky areas. And also at SWOT, we're always out and about doing file reviews. We do a lot of tax training, so we're also aware of common risk areas that the revenue haven't perhaps addressed in a toolkit. So by combining the two, we can get questions from the best of both worlds. I'll come back to topical checklists in a moment, but for now we're going to leave that as no to say we want all questions, not just ones that are particularly topical. And then moving down through the generator, we can see that it still thinks it's a personal return because that's what was selected at part 2, and it's asking us what type of income this client has. So it's defaulting to self-employed and somebody that has the main return, but we might want to say, well, they've actually got employment and they've perhaps got a bit of rental income, so we might change those to yes. So we are, by doing this, by working through steps 1 through to 5 here, creating a checklist that is personable to this client. Once we've selected our options, we go to the checklist itself in the third tab, and we can see that we have now got this specific checklist for this particular client. All of our client details that we entered on the previous tab have now come through at the top of the screen. And we've got the checklist. So we could, as I said, start filling it in on screen. When we come to an area such as this, so has all business income been included in the accounts? We've got a choice. We could just answer it and say, yep, for this client, we're sure it is. We don't need more detail. But if it's a particularly risky area, what we can do is use these green buttons when they appear, which allows us to expand a question out and see more detail in that topic. So if we change this to yes, we can see we've now made the checklist longer, and we've got more questions about business income. And at this stage, depending on the policy that your firm decides to implement, we could either go through and fill all those in individually, normal, or perhaps we would say just scan those to look at the particular issues we're considering when looking at the answer to this main question. And then if we wanted to do that, we could always revert that back to no and keep the checklist short and manageable. With all of these green boxes where we can expand out for more detail, we can do it individually, as I've been doing there, so open and shut a particular question, or at the top we have show all and show summary, and this produces an action for all green boxes. So if we press show all, every single expandable question in the checklist has now expanded out. If we now decide this checklist is far too long to be commercially sensible for a client of this size, we can revert it back to show summary, and we're producing this shorter checklist. And we can toggle between those at any time. So those buttons are always there and active. If we're looking at a question and we want some more information about it, so perhaps we're considering the rules for tips, gratuities and service charges, we can press help. And then what we get is this help menu popping up that repeats the question and then gives some guidance on the question. So there's always an amount of guidance that appears straight away in the box, but with the vast majority of cases there's also a link to further information. So we can see here that this one links through to help sheet E24, and if we press show, it checks we're happy to open a PDF. And in Internet Explorer, if we bring that back up, we can see that that help sheet has now launched. So this happens with every technical area, with every checklist. We've got help in the checklist itself, and in most cases links to further information. Back to Excel. If we go back to show summary, so we've got the smaller checklist and just start scrolling down. Actually, I'm going to scroll back up to start with. We can see we're starting off with self-employed income, which is one of the areas we selected for Joe Blogs. It's also brought in employment income, and it's brought in property income as we required. And if we keep scrolling down, we'll also see the questions that relate to the main return, which was also on that initial checklist. If we want at any point, we can go back to the generator and change our tailoring options. So if we want to add in, say, some firm's own bespoke questions, we can change that to yes, go back to the checklist, and we've now got this bespoke section appearing. Now this can be very useful if you are going to save a template on a firm server somewhere, because you could ask a question such as, has form BI 400 been completed? So something specific to your firm that you want to be completed with every, say, personal tax return assignment, and you can add that in. And it's possible through the normal expansion method to add up to 6 of your own firm's questions to any of these checklists, and you can do that by saving a template onto your own firm's server. There is this note number column at the end, so at any point you can put a note number in that final column and then cross-refer it to further information that can be recorded in this conclusion box at the end. So anything that needs further attention can be addressed there. But when we are happy and everything's done, the preparer can sign it off as normal. And the checklist is then ready for review. So at this point, we may print it. So it just prints as normal as an Excel would. All the print areas have been set up already. So if we look at print preview, we can see what the checklist would look like, and that could be printed, or as I said before, it could be saved in a client file. We may choose to save it in Excel, or if we want a smaller file, we can save it as a PDF. Just before we leave the checklist, I did say I'd come back and show you what the topical feature does. This can be a particularly good way of creating short but very punchy and very relevant checklists. So what we can do is, for any client, we can say we want to see topical questions only. And what we do at SWOT whenever we update these checklists is we mark any questions that are particularly relevant for the tax year in question. So for the 12-13 returns, we'll be looking at things like the changes in the annual investment allowance that were particularly topical for that tax year. And then when we look at the checklist, we can see it's changed quite a lot. It's gone beyond bringing in every question that the revenue and SWOT have thought about. The show all, the show summary buttons, they've all now disappeared because we're just pulling out matters that are particularly topical for this particular tax year. So this is a really good way to produce a short but very relevant checklist. So we can see here for 12-13, like I say, it's bringing in particular the annual investment transitional rules. It's bringing in, I saw a moment ago, the new high income child benefit charge that applied to 12-13 for the first time. So all sorts of topical points come through in the checklist in that way. So that's how Excel works. So if we now shut that down, for now I'm not going to save. And we're now back to the control panel, and I wanted to come back to this because while the Excel spreadsheet, which we've seen, is very interactive, you can expand it, you can shorten it, you can use it as you wish for the majority of client types. There is more within this product. What we can see is we've got a button for pre-prepared checklists. So this is quick access. So actually we just, using Excel, produced a topical checklist for personal tax returns. If we didn't want to go through those steps, we could just open one this way. And straight away, just with pressing that button, we've now got a personal tax topical checklist ready for printing and use on the files without having to go through the tailoring steps if we wanted to do something quickly. What we've also got in pre-prepared checklists is a RTI checklist. So this can't be produced through the generator, but because it is so topical, we did want to put an RTI checklist in. This has been left in Word so that if you want to add to or take away from this, you can do so, depending on where you or your clients are with RTI processes. So for example, I'm recording this demo in May. For the majority of your clients, you probably have now aligned, unless you've got any of the larger employers that may be joining later in the year. So you might want to say, okay, we've dealt with alignment now, we don't need questions on that, we'll take it out of our template. So you might get rid of those rows, which you can do. So it's very easy to tailor this in Word according to your firm's own procedures and your firm's own requirements. So that's the pre-prepared checklist. A number there that you are able to refer to. If we go back to the control panel, we can still see that there is more. So we have help sheets in the product. 3 help sheets at the moment. So tax agents and HMRC, that's an ongoing help sheet dealing with the relationship changes between the revenue and agents, and in particular this move towards self-serve and perhaps agent view that are being considered for the future. Lots of information in help sheet 2 on inaccuracy penalties, and so if you wanted to look something up or wanted a refresher on penalties, you could get it through this help sheet. So if your client has perhaps been made liable to a careless penalty and you wanted to look at ways to encourage the revenue to suspend that penalty, you could jump to section 2.11 and read where the latest is with suspended penalties. And all areas of this product are kept up to date on a live basis. Because it's online, if something changes, the product gets updated shortly after the time of the change. Back to the control panel, we can also see that we can access a webinar. So we tend to keep a recent tax update recording sitting in this area. So again, this will get updated as more relevant news comes out. So any subscribers can simply click play, and you can now hear that starting in the background because my computer's playing the noise. We'll mute that now. So that's now going, it's playing. You can jump forward in the webinar recording and access the material you want. You could also download the course notes that go with that webinar recording. So a great feature, particularly for the topical checklist. So we're seeing there's something going on with the annual investment allowance and transitional rules, but we want training in that. The help alone isn't sufficient if we haven't yet had the training, so we can access that in this webinar recording. We tend to add technician level webinar recordings here for updates so that they can be used by anybody in the firm. So this is very practical training. There's also a tab for news. So as we do start growing this product on a live basis, any news, so any recent changes are going to be recorded in this tab. When we update, so for example, when the revenue released new toolkits and they've emphasized a new area, we will detail what's happened, what the recent updates are there. So that's an overview of what's included in the product and what subscribers can access. Any questions whatsoever, always feel free to give us a call in this number in the top left-hand side of the screen. Thank you very much for listening. I hope the product is of interest to you. And like I say, do give us a call if you have any questions whatsoever.